Good afternoon. Hi. Welcome to William Paterson, those who are visiting us, and students and faculty. I'm Joanne Lee, and I've been asked to moderate this panel. I'm from the communication department, and today's topic, as you know, is gun safety. 9 months ago in Parkland, Florida, a 19-year-old armed with a semi-automatic walked into the Marjory Stoneman Douglas School and killed 17 people, 14 students, 3 staff members. The shooter is awaiting trial. In the Sandy Hook School shooting in Newtown, Connecticut, 6 years ago, 26 people were killed, 20 children, 6 adults. The gunman then turned the gun on himself. This panel was planned over a 2-month period. The idea for doing this panel started when Professor Liz Stroppel of the communication department. Hi, Liz. Chose to do as a campus production the play 26 Pebbles. It will be performed starting November 13th through the 18th in the Black Box. The play explores the aftermath of the Sandy Hook shooting, and little did we know that the gun culture of violence would again surface this week in Pittsburgh with 11 people gunned down while worshiping in the Tree of Life synagogue. I'd like to introduce our panelists today. Brett Sabo, leader of the New Jersey chapter of Moms Demanding Action for Gun Sense in America. Tom Campbell, director of the Newtown Foundation and Newtown Action Alliance. Lieutenant George Guzman, a member of the Haledon Police Department. And to my right, 2 survivors of the Parkland, Florida shooting, Macy Wanacott, Macy, and Taylor Morales. Each panelist has been asked to give a brief introductory statement, so I'd like to start with Taylor. Taylor was a senior at Marjory Stoneman Douglas last February. She's now attending Florida Gulf Coast College in Fort Myers. Thank you for coming. I know it was a trip to fly here, but we're glad you're here. Can you begin with where you were during the shooting that day and give us some thoughts on how your life has changed since then?
Hi, my name is Taylor Morales. I am 18 and I was a senior at Stoneman Douglas High School earlier this year. 9 months ago, I was cheering for my friend Gina as she performed her heart out during a color guard competition. 9 months ago, I would come home from school to see my neighbor Joaquin smile at me. 9 months ago, I took all of these things for granted. And I can't even begin to explain how much I regret that. Gina and Joaquin were 2 out of the 17 students and faculty who lost their lives to a violent kid. A violent kid who was viewed in the eyes of the law as too young and undeveloped to drink, but just old enough to buy a semi-automatic rifle. I showed up on Valentine's Day expecting red hearts, cards, and balloons. Instead, I saw a different type of red. On that day, in that moment, I realized I was entirely helpless. I had no control. I had to sit there and pray to not hear the sound of his footsteps walking towards my classroom door. I had to sit there listening to their screams as he shot round after round through my peers. We were failed, not only by my school resource officers, but by the Broward School District and the current federal and state legislature. The laws in place now are not enough. We were supposed to be protected. We were supposed to be safe. The solution is not more guns, and the solution is not a ban on all guns. There's a middle ground. It's called common sense. common sense ways that we could reform our gun laws without infringing on the rights of lawful gun owners. It sounds simple, but we allow ourselves to get distracted by the wrong goals. It seems to me that we are more concerned with winning a debate than finding an effective solution. We should be focusing on creating a well-organized and thorough background check, one that is void of all loopholes. Our system should be built for accuracy, not speed. A system that could have prevented the 58 deaths in Las Vegas. A system that should have prevented the 49 deaths at Pulse nightclub, the 32 at Virginia Tech, the 26 at Sandy Hook, 25 and an unborn child at Texas Church, 17 at Stoneman Douglas, 13 at Columbine, 12 at Aurora, 10 at Santa Fe, 9 at Charleston Church, and most recently, 11, killed ruthlessly at the Pittsburgh synagogue. I could continue, because trust me, there are more than a few that I left out. But sadly, we don't have the time. Long story short, they all deserved much better. I am only 18. I shouldn't know the sounds of gunshots as well as I do. I shouldn't be able to recall the sight of bloody children laying still in my school hallway. I shouldn't see the eyes of my dead classmates reflected in my little sister's stuffed animals. But I do. My life is forever changed. It's too late for the victims already lost, but it is not too late to save the mass shooting victims of the future. We need action, not empty promises. Thank you.
Taylor, thank you for those very sobering thoughts. Macy Wanacott, you were also there. Tell us about your thoughts.
Love, happiness, and excitement. Those are just a few words you could use to describe how you should feel on Valentine's Day. Instead, all we felt was fear, horror, and sadness. Instead, we lost 17 beautiful people. Even though my experience wasn't as big or extreme as others, the impact on my life was huge. I wasn't in the building, I didn't see destruction left in his wake, but I won't forget the blatant fear I felt. I won't forget the sounds of gunshots in the distance. I won't forget hearing my classmates bang on the door, begging for their lives for us to let them in. And I won't ever forget my teacher's words, "Suspected shots fired at Stoneman Douglas." It was the last 20 minutes of fourth period when my world turned upside down. When I was leaving the school, it felt as if I didn't know where I was. This wasn't the school I had gone to for 4 years. This had to be a horrible dream. It has been 8 months since a gunman came into my school and killed 17 of my classmates. They will never get to graduate, never get to go to college, and never get to follow their biggest dreams in life. Gina, who was the sweetest girl I know. She was there to lend a hand when you needed one. He also took away our innocence and exposed us to the evils of the world. But the biggest thing he took away was our sense of safety. I catch myself getting scared if I hear a bang or people running down the hall. I make sure I always sit away from doors in class. I find myself getting scared in public places, thinking, is something bad going to happen? I shouldn't have to feel scared in school, the movies, a concert, work, or even just going to church. Nobody should ever have to feel like this, and this is why we need change. This isn't just state problems. This is a nation's problem. How do we stop people from dying from mass shootings and gun violence? First, we stop being so stubborn and work together. We look past our different views and political parties. Certain elected officials care more about money than the public they are supposed to be representing. They sit in their office as people show up to discuss the issues with them, and what do? They send them away. We need to fix the issue of how easy it is to be able to get a gun. We need background checks that are actually useful. It should not be so easy and simple that you're walking out of a shop in 15 minutes with a gun in your hand. There should be flags for people who have struggled mentally and been in hospitals, bought bulk amount of guns, and had many run-ins with the police. There shouldn't be the gun show loophole, which allows private sellers to sell guns without performing any type of background check. There are currently 32 states who have made no effort to change this. That is 32 states too many. We can be the change. We can be the ones who break this repeating cycle, but we have to work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Macy. To my left, we have Lieutenant George Guzman. He is a member of the Haledon Police Department, but he has started his career here at William Paterson on our campus police force. Among his many duties today, he is a state-certified trainer for the New Jersey Training Commission, including firearms training. So, welcome, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
And what are the difficulties for law enforcement to get illegal guns off the streets of New Jersey?
Thank you, Dr. Chow. Appreciate your question. But first and foremost, how about a round of applause for these brave young women? Make no mistake about it, it's been very difficult getting illegal guns off the streets. It's become a lot harder. In 2003, the New Jersey Supreme Court ruled that law enforcement needed at the minimum reasonable articulable suspicion before they can ask a motorist for consent to search. Now, I do agree with that level of belief and proof. I do agree that we shouldn't just be able to randomly ask a motorist for consent to search or permission to search their vehicle. But what happened was our troopers were on the highways, on the turnpike, on the parkway, and a lot of the illegal guns that come into our state, they come in from out of state through those arteries. So those troopers used to be out there, they used to be able to pull someone over and ask them, can I search your car? Just randomly. And they used to go head on, they searched the vehicle, they used to recover a lot of weapons. The Jersey Supreme Court said absolutely not, that is not justified, that should not be permissible. From now on, before a police officer in the state of New Jersey may even dare to ask for permission to search, the police officer must first have reasonable, articulable suspicion the evidence of criminal offense may be found within the vehicle. So what happened was the seizures of guns went from here down here. So now we're dealing with a situation where we have a lot more illegal guns on our streets. So a lot of these things are a catch-22. Yeah, we're all about preserving citizens' rights, but now we're getting less guns off the streets. So what do? What we need to do is, once and for all, put this Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative notion to the side, and it's time for common sense gun laws and common sense laws, period. We can do it. We can do it. All we need to do is bring all the stakeholders forward. Our students, our legislatures, our victims. I'm also a proud member of the Haledon Board of Education, and I'm proud to have co-sponsored a resolution to give us a seat at the table as well, so they can get our input done at the state legislature. And I am also proud of the laws that we have within the state of New Jersey. A lot of great laws have went into effect. Instead of 15-round magazines, now in the state of New Jersey, you can only have 10-round magazines. There's a prohibition on body armor penetrating bullets. We're also requiring background checks for private gun sales. So we're making a lot of strides here in the state of New Jersey, and I'm very proud of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that information. We also have with us today leaders for two organizations working to stop gun violence. Tom Campbell is the director of the Newtown Foundation and Newtown Action Alliance. The group was founded after Sandy Hook. Tom lives about 10 miles from Sandy Hook School in Connecticut. There is a national vigil coming up in Washington for gun violence in December. I'd like, Tom, if you can, to walk us through some of the logistics in organizing and getting people involved and what it means to try to meet up with legislators to make some changes, to request them.
Thank you very much. And to the audience, thank you for coming. This is a very important issue that you're all facing. We are all potential victims. There's no safe place. You have an opportunity coming up, some of you perhaps this Tuesday. You should exercise that. That's a way of change. It's the most effective, long-range change that you can make. With regard to the logistics, I actually started a chapter of the Brady campaign in Danbury, Greater Danbury, within about a week of the Sandy Hook shooting. Why that? Because I was familiar with Brady. I knew they had a national organization, and we could get on their back, so to speak, get the paperwork done to establish 501c3s and 501c4s, and get charters and communications going. And that's still up and running. A few months later, I was invited onto the board of the Newtown Foundation and the Newtown Action Alliance. Now, fortunately, the different points of view about this, this problem are not just right and left. There are nuances throughout both sides. And in Newtown, there were a couple of organizations that were started. Newtown Action, Newtown Foundation, one of them. I say one, there's two obviously, but they're the same group, two different functions. Another group is Sandy Hook Promise, and they have taken a different road. They're not into advocacy. They are more involved with establishing protocols to help identify students at risk and how to deal with them at the school level. We, on the other hand, felt that you had to advocate, had to get in front of the state legislators and the federal legislators in order to improve the existing rules and regs on how guns are handled. To a great extent, that was very effective in Connecticut, which, like New Jersey and like New York, has a pretty good regime of rules and regs right now. Can they be improved? Sure they can. And we'll be in Hartford the next session in front of them, talking to them, negotiating. Washington, on the other hand, hasn't done a damn thing in 25 years. We still go down there. I average about 2 trips a year, along with my colleagues in Newtown, to go down there to promote various ideas, universal background checks, as New Jersey has and Connecticut has on a state level, a federal trafficking bill to address some of the problems that the chief has identified with guns that are coming from out of state. Like New Jersey, Connecticut has about 50% of its crime guns coming from out of state. The Iron Highway, I-95, is bringing guns up from Virginia, Georgia, Florida, everywhere where guns are easily available. They're coming up in trunks of cars, they're coming in flatbeds, they're coming in all sorts of ways. Is it difficult? What is difficult is to maintain the momentum. After a shooting like Sandy Hook, after a shooting like Aurora, Columbine, San Bernardino, Santa Fe, et cetera, there's a wave of concern. People want to do something. They have to release their emotions, and they do. 6, 8, 9 months later, well, they're not necessarily that motivated, and the rest of their lives take over. They're working, they're raising families, they're doing all sorts of different things. Others, myself, I'm a survivor. My dad was killed 55 years ago in New York City. You know, that doesn't leave you. That's something you live with and you deal with for the rest of your life. And after Sandy Hook, when I was living 10 miles away from this school, I committed myself to this cause. So it's basically how I've replaced retirement. It's what I do. Is it satisfying? Yeah, but you've got to take that on an incremental level. Everything changes at the margin, and we can affect a change here and there and keep this issue in front of people. And with the help of the new generation from Stedman, we're ready to pass the torch to you guys. You can change. You're going to have a new wave of politicians that you select, that you can influence, that you can get the more common sense treatment of guns in our society. It's up to us, it's up to you. So it's not all that difficult, but you've got to stay motivated. This has got to become a major issue in your life.
Thank you. A lot of complexities there. I'd like to introduce Brett Sabo. She's the leader of the New Jersey chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. This is a group with chapters nationwide. Brett, welcome, and tell us more about Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense and how you got involved.
Okay, thank you for having me, and thank you all for coming. I got involved in 2014 when Richard Martinez's son, Christopher, was shot in Isla Vista, California, and Richard got in front of the camera hours later and said, not one more parent should lose a child, not one more student should lose a classmate, and that was my call to action. And so that's what made me get up off the couch and join Moms Demand Action. For Shannon Watts, her call to action was the Sandy Hook shooting, and the day after that, she started a Facebook page, and it grew to a national organization that's over 5 million members strong. And she basically modeled it after what she said was, we need a Mothers Against Drunk Driving for gun violence. And so she literally modeled it after that. So we are a grassroots organization that simply believes that more can be done to prevent the 93 people that die every day from a gun from happening. We can respect the Second Amendment, but we can do more. And we, because states have their own gun laws, each chapter of Moms Demand Action looks very different here in New Jersey, but we all have the same common goals, which is passing good legislation, fighting bad legislation, educating people about safe gun storage, about responsible gun ownership. We are made up of, we say we're mothers and others, we're mothers and fathers and Republicans and Democrats and gun owners and students now. We did start Students Demand Action. And here in New Jersey, we have a group that's about 10,000 strong. We have 15 local groups throughout the state. And we have worked with our legislators in Trenton, most recently to pass this package of 6 gun safety bills, which one of them was reducing the magazine capacity from 15 to 10, also a red flag law, and requiring background checks for private gun sales. We are working with Governor Murphy's administration on reducing gun trafficking. It's a big priority for him, and it's a priority for us, especially here in New Jersey. New Jersey has the third or fourth strongest gun laws in the country, and the country really looks to us to see how strong gun laws keep people safe. And so that's what we work on doing.
Thank you very much. I think it's important to hear from many people who are working in very different fronts to address the issue of gun violence, because, as everybody said here and out there, it affects everybody, all right? It is race blind, color blind, age blind, sex blind. It's random in many cases. So I'd like to ask the panel, I'll start with the first question, and clearly we want everybody some people, if you want to come up and ask questions after a couple of questions that I've prepared for the panel. And the first one is, there has been talk each time there is such a shooting that maybe we should have more trained personnel armed in schools or churches to protect. What are your thoughts on that? Is that even a conceivable solution? Everybody chime in.
Well, I think that there are certain areas, certain situations where a trained officer, part of the constabulary, should be on site. I don't think it should be a security guard. I don't think it, by no means do I think it should be an armed teacher. But if somebody there with the training and the skill to not only deal with the situation, but to de-escalate the situation before it potentially goes to complete disaster. Yeah, there are just certain areas that in schools that until they're rehabilitated, you'd have to deal with it that way. I don't think it's the answer to everybody's problem. Unfortunately, these school shootings are very dramatic. I shouldn't say unfortunately, they are very dramatic. Unfortunately, they steal the headlines. School is still a safe place to be. In certain areas, it's safer to be in school than it is to be on the street. So we don't want to take that away. We don't want to make a school an armed camp, but we do want to protect the students that are enrolled.
Okay, George, and then Taylor.
First and foremost, how many people here are actual students of William Paterson University? That's great. Well, I'm here to tell each and every one of you, you are fortunate to have a first-class law enforcement agency in the William Paterson University Police Department serving you. They're a highly trained police department. In addition to having those police officers on campus who are bona fide police officers, make no mistake about it, you also have security guards in every dormitory. You also have security officers that are in the parking lots, monitoring the lots. They're there to observe and report. On top of that, you have the student patrol. I think what we need to do as it pertains to the professors and administration and so on and so forth is just better training. We need better training on identifying early warning signs of an active shooter. What do all these hostile intruders and active shooters have in common? Most of them did have a red flag. And sometimes no one said anything because they were afraid they were gonna hurt someone's feelings or they might be wrong. That's the wrong answer. If you see something, you say something. That's a motto that every American should live by. Thank you.
Thank you. Taylor?
I agree with the fact that maybe if there was more trained personnel or guards, that might help the situation and offer more protection towards schools. And I also agree that that's not the actual answer that will solve the problem. Because if more armed security is the answer, then where could we go that's safe? Do we have to add that armed security at churches or concerts, or like just increase it everywhere we go? So it is for the school area, not arming teachers, but trained personnel. It would increase the protection, but that's not the true problem.
Okay, my next question deals with what is considered a common sense gun law? How would you define it?
I'll step in real quick. A common sense gun law is a background check for every gun sale. Whether it's at a gun show, whether it's private, whether it's online, that is a common sense gun law. And that's something that everybody should be able to agree on. That's an example for me.
Now, gun laws primarily have filtered down to the state level because obviously at the federal level, there's a level of stasis going on, right?
Right.
So how do we do common sense gun laws at a national level? Is it even possible? That's really...
This is the United States of America. Anything is possible.
I think
Well
it's
spoken.
possible if we elect people who really represent us and don't represent the gun lobby and the NRA leadership, and everybody is active and knows who they're voting for and where they get their money from.
So it sounds like the answer really needs to come from a legislative side at this point?
If we want federal legislation, then we have to get people in DC who are going to do what they need to do.
There's a slogan that we should all keep in mind. You vote gun safety. That's the way you get it. Okay, it's not up to us to write the rules and regulations. The chief enforces what's on the books. We live in the shadow of the legislation. It's the legislators who write the laws. And we have to make sure we have the right people in those places. If they're not, get them out.
Yeah.
You know, it's up to you guys and us to figure out what each legislator represents. What is his response, her response to the question? Where are you going with gun safety? What are you going to do to prevent gun violence? If they don't answer that appropriately, you know, next online, please. You know, just get rid of them.
Okay, I'm going to touch the third rail here, third rail of this conversation, which is the Second Amendment, and treading on the Second Amendment. How does one navigate those issues that are always at the forefront anytime we talk about this?
I don't think the Second Amendment has to be a third rail issue. I think the leadership and the gun lobby and the gun manufacturers have manipulated it to try to divide everybody and distract from what the real problem is, the culture that they've created and the sheer number of guns that are out there. And they use the Second Amendment, and they use the word freedom, and they use the word, patriot to try to divide us. The Second Amendment is even Justice Scalia said there needs to be reasonable limitations on the Second Amendment.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to give the audience an opportunity to ask questions. We have microphones on both sides, so if you'd like to step up and ask some questions, please do.
And as you're coming up, if you're a student and you want to join Students Demand Action, you can text students to 64433, and we have several groups in the state if you want to get involved.
What is that again, please?
If you text students to 64433, you can be connected and join Students Demand Action.
Okay. Professor Burge.
I want to thank you all for coming, especially the students from Parkland, who I think their work is heartbreaking and really affirming, and I think we owe you a great debt of gratitude. My question is for the lieutenant. I wondered what constituted reasonable cause or probable cause in terms of pulling over cars on the Turnpike or the Garden State?
Sure. Like I said, the landmark court decision was back in 2002, 2003, State versus Cardi. And once again, they established that the officer needs reasonable suspicion. So first, let me start by saying this. We have levels of belief and proof. First, an officer has a hunch. That's simply a police officer's gut feeling that criminal activity is afoot. Unfortunately, that's not enough to stop somebody where they're no longer free to leave. After a hunch comes reasonable suspicion, then probable cause, preponderance of evidence, clear and convincing evidence, and then, of course, proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So the level of belief and proof we need to ask for consent to search on a motor vehicle stop is reasonable suspicion. So you're asking me, okay, give me an example, correct? So reasonable suspicion would be, let's say I attempt to stop a motor vehicle. The vehicle has ample space and opportunity to pull over, but they're not doing so. They're continuing, they're evading me. Okay, I'm continuing, and as I'm following the vehicle, there's a lot of movement within the vehicle. As I approach the vehicle, I see the driver reaching underneath the driver's side seat. There's strong odor of marijuana emanating from the vehicle. So based on the totality of the circumstances, the officer will have reasonable, articulable suspicion to believe that something may be wrong. And therefore, the officer will continue with the investigation from there. So it's all about the totality of the circumstances. There's no magic formula. Every case is different. Everything is on a case-by-case basis.
Where can you not search?
Excuse me?
Give me an example where you can't do consent search.
An example is, okay, I pull you over for running a stop sign. I say, hey, can I search your car? That's not gonna work, okay? There's different times when we search. It's not just consent. There's also something called the automobile exception. If we have probable cause and exigent circumstances to believe that the vehicle contains contraband, then we can search the vehicle, the passenger compartment, without a warrant. Okay, there's other circumstances such as the Terry doctrine. If we feel there's a weapon in the vehicle, all right, we're gonna conduct a limited search of the vehicle in search of a weapon. So there's many different circumstances where an officer may legally search the motor vehicle without a search warrant.
But it's tougher today.
It is very tough. It's not easy. Citizens of the state of New Jersey, you virtually have more rights than any citizen in the country. And for that, you're very fortunate to have that. But just bear in mind that it makes the law enforcement officer's job harder as well to seize illegal contraband such as guns and drugs and things of that nature. So I'm not saying I disagree with it. I'm just saying it makes the officer's job in the state of New Jersey a lot harder. So we have to find common sense ground here. You hear the notion that the only person that could stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Some people disagree with that, but let's be honest, that's probably true. So, okay, whoever says that's not true, tell me why, please. Go ahead.
I'm happy to answer that because there's evidence that shows that under pressure, police officers have a high rate of missed targets.
That's correct. Yeah, as a firearm instructor for 10 years, I can attest to that. You're right. And also in these active shooter situations, what ends up happening? Either the officer takes the target out or the target commits suicide, correct? So at the end of the day, someone is going to engage that target and is going to try to eliminate that threat. That's my point. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to add a comment there, and with all due respect, Chief, there are too many good guys who have guns, and they're considered good until they actually pull the trigger. Just way too many people who shouldn't really have guns have them. And there's very limited ways of identifying them beforehand. So I would agree that a good cop is gonna stop a bad guy with a gun, but a good citizen, I don't know who the hell that is. There's no way of my knowing who that is.
Yeah. I agree. And that's why in the state of New Jersey, there's been great legislation such as you have to have, a lot of other states, you can just carry a firearm. You can walk in and you can openly carry a firearm in many other states. In the state of New Jersey, there's a distinct difference between just having a purchase permit to buy a firearm and you keep it at home versus having a carrier's permit. In the state of New Jersey, in order to carry a firearm, for an average citizen to carry a firearm, they have to go in front of a Superior Court judge and show a true justifiable need to carry that firearm, which I'm totally in agreement with.
Great, thank you. We have a question to this end?
So, being that the Second Amendment was established so that the people could create a militia if anything was to happen. And to enter the military, you go through a psychological exam. And if you don't pass, you cannot be in the military because you operate firearms and have the nation's safety at hand. So would it be completely, hard to tie those things together as to having our militia, the people owning guns legally in the United States, to have that same psychological exam given to them that we give people that we trust to protect us?
I'm sure.
I didn't hear the question. Could you, I'm sorry, we had difficulty hearing. Can you get closer to the mic
okay.
or?
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so since the Second Amendment was made to basically create a militia amongst the people to protect ourselves, and at the same time we have the armed forces that go through a psychological exam to deem if they are psychologically strong enough to have a firearm and the nation's safety in hand. Would it be unreasonable to tie that to having our militia go through the same psychological exam to deem if they can own a gun and protect us, because essentially that's what the Second Amendment is for? Is that unreasonable?
So you're saying you're asking about psychological testing to own a gun? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Great question.
Yeah, it is
Sure.
a great question.
Absolutely. It's very difficult to get that by the legislature, though. They just kind of shy away and say, wait a minute, you're going too far. What's going on here? Now, but that should be on everybody's agenda, to have a more rigorous exam before somebody can buy a gun. With regard to the militia, for some, the gun industry and its puppets, the NRA and the NSSF, have been very, very talented and very effective in removing 13 words from the Second Amendment. They've been at it for 50 years and they've achieved it. Okay? But as was mentioned before by Brett, the Scalia decision basically empowers the communities to still maintain control of who, what, where, when, and what can be out in the public. So we have that to rely on, and using that, perhaps we can enhance the testing of people to include psychological references.
I also want to add that the gun lobby and the NRA leadership often use mental illness as a pivot, because a lot of these high-profile shootings obviously involve people that are mentally ill. The vast majority of mentally ill people are victims rather than perpetrators. And the mass shootings that get that get all the attention are very powerful messages. But a lot of the gun crime, a lot of the people that are killed are either killing themselves or they're being killed with illegal guns. So I think that would be great. It always gets very sketchy around mental illness and privacy issues, so that would probably be another barrier, but it's a great idea.
I think we need to move on to the next question. I hope that has answered yours.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We have a question on this side.
Hi, thank you. First, I have a comment and then I have a question. I just want to bring to light a shooting that did happen recently that kind of got washed over during the pipe bombs. A man in Kentucky went up to a church, banged on the door. The doors were locked, he couldn't get in. He went across the street to a grocery store, went inside, shot one person, came outside, and shot another. And I feel like this one is getting a little bit overlooked because it was a racially motivated attack against a black church, a black community, and two black people at the grocery store. And my question adds into that a little bit of, we recognize that there are some things that are used as you mentioned, symptoms that we try to treat in order to kind of pull back where we can affect. So putting armed guards in schools or in churches would be treating a symptom, but not the response. Treating or blaming mental health in some cases would work, but at the end of the day, it's a symptom of something larger, not really getting to the meat of the issue, which in like many cases with mass shootings, when it's a white person doing it, it's a lone wolf or it's mental illness, where if it's happening against black people or within black communities, it's considered black on black violence. Or when it's police against black people, it's considered they ran, they weren't looking, they were being suspicious, etc. So how do we find out what this root cause of violence is? Is it systemic? Is it privileges? Is it some desperate need for rights and authority? And how do we treat the symptoms while still recognizing that that's not enough? How do we do more at the core of it all?
That's a great question. I don't know personally. I think it's such a complicated issue, and there's so many factions, and there's so many reasons, from mental health to political reasons to simple hatred or personal reasons. I'm not sure there is one answer, but anybody, you go for it.
Joe,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You had said in the beginning that gun violence doesn't know race or age or gender, but actually it does. I think there is so much. The majority of the people that are dying are black and brown people. And it's very hard, or it's very easy for me to sit up here as a middle-class white woman, but we really are trying to get into the neighborhoods that are hardest hit by gun violence. And it is such a complicated issue, and you're right, it becomes black on black crime. And I'm going to bring it up again. The NRA leadership loves to scare people that you need to buy more guns, and then they like to scare the minorities and saying you have to protect yourself because everybody has a gun and it sells a lot more guns. So when their motivation is profit, it gets very hard to deal with the social issues. And the proliferation of the guns out there is so huge.
Thank you for your question. Great question. Not sure
I
anybody has the answer.
completely agree with what you're saying on the fact that, a white person can do it and they're described as troubled or, a broken soul. But when it's someone of color or it's someone of a different ethnicity, they're a terrorist or they're any type of negative connotation. So I completely understand what you're saying. And the fact is, what's the issue? The core grassroots issue, we have no control. That's what it is. We have no control over our guns. We have no control over our people. And people say that, why are we saying that guns are the problem? And that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if you're saying mental illness and people are the problem, why do you want the problem to have guns?
Can I just add something?
Thank you.
I think Macy wanted to add. Yeah.
She brought up how it wasn't brought to light really of the 2 people killed in Kentucky, and I think that's also a problem. We like to look at the mass shootings that are like 17, 12, 13, but we also need to focus on the shootings that are happening in schools and other places with just 1, 2, or 3 people. But that's also the problem. There was a shooting recently, I'm not sure what state, but this kid was bullied and they were supposed to have an altercation in school. He went to school, shot the kid, and the kid died. So it's not just these mass shootings, we need to look at the individual shootings also.
Access to guns, legal or illegal. Thank you. On this side.
Hello. I kind of had a question. It was for all the panelists. There was kind of like, I'm not really so sure myself, but there's a decision that's being made if whether teachers should be able to own guns and have it in place like in the classroom for protection purposes. I wanted to ask you, like, for your opinion, do you believe that teachers should have possess guns and have it like within the classroom? Or do you think that it's like a good idea? Do you think that it could be a danger to students as well if the teacher like themselves actually have a mental illness or could possibly shoot up the school or so? That's my question.
Teachers
absolutely not a
should
good
not
idea.
be armed.
No, I think arming teachers is a colossal mistake. Even in the really rural areas of the United States where it might take a police force to respond in 10, 12, 15 minutes, where have there been any incidents in those areas that would even lead that community to say we need armed teachers? You know, it just doesn't occur. So it's a solution to a problem that doesn't exist there. In any other area where there's a local police force, I think it's absurd to have private citizens like teachers carrying in, no matter what training they're going to be asked to go through. It's either going to be constabulary, and you know there's another area to this. You can't do this on the cheap. If they think it's going to be cheaper to arm a teacher rather than having the police force there, well then they're lying to themselves. They've got to sit down and say, if we want to have protection, how many cops do we need for each school? How many shifts is that? How many additional dollars is going to be spent? And then vote on it. You want to spend money like that? Okay. Do you want to spend money in a different way? Do you want to solve the problems that's underlying all of this stuff by improving the job situations available, the educational situation, relieving the pressures on the community? That's a different story, you know, and it's maybe a decision that they all have to face.
And the odds of an armed teacher actually being able to successfully take down a shooter is just pretty much non-existent. It's not realistic either, and dangerous.
I just want to say that as a teacher, I came to teach. I did not come to carry a gun to protect myself. I cannot see the day where I have to carry a gun to my classroom. I think there's a question of humanity here and the function of education, and I don't think it includes a gun. Just me personally.
Also, I'd like to add, at our school, we had resource officers, and we also had the Broward sheriffs come. There was officers, they were scared to go in and check out. Why do we expect teachers to not be scared and go up against a shooter if we have police officers that won't even go in?
Now, I have to say that we live in the Northeast, and in my travels, I have met people in the Midwest who feel totally comfortable with the idea of carrying a shotgun in his or her car because certain states allow it, okay? And having said that, it's very commonplace. So a lot of it is the gun culture in which one is raised. I'm sure if you move outside of this tri-state area and you go to pockets of this country where there are very clear laws about ownership, protecting ownership, it would be a different response. But just from my perspective, educators are here to educate, and having to strap a gun on to go to work scares me.
Hi, thank you all for being here, especially the students. So much admiration and respect, the courage you continue to show, and just want to say that you represent such a wonderful part of society, and thank you very much, and I'm very appreciative for that. I don't really have a question, I have a couple of statements, if I may. Everybody talks, I'm a clinician, everybody talks about mental illness, mental illness, mental illness. I agree that there are people who have mental illness who have been, have and are responsible for certain shootings, but what people forget is that the vast majority of people who suffer from mental illness are never seen by a clinician. There's no way to track people, so what you're really doing is you're putting a stigma on people who have sought treatment. And I agree, if they're at risk, that's an issue. But what happens is then you're now saying that if you've been treated for mental illness, if you've had this, if you've had that, then you're at risk to be a shooter. Not true. So I think that we have to understand that there are a lot of people out there who've never seen a clinician. There's never any word or idea that perhaps they're in need of help. I certainly agree that, as therapists, we can help so many people, and that's important if they choose to come in. I also think that we have to understand that there are a lot of people filled with hate and are toxic, and the real issue is they hate. And we can go back and trace why they hate and what that's about, but if you're a person who hates, you might pick up a gun and go after somebody. So I think that there's so many issues, socioeconomic issues, or some reasons people have guns because they have to protect themselves. And if we had more socioeconomic equality, we'd see a lot of changes as well. And I think that the more we become a society that is authoritarian, that is more, with no disrespect to the police, but more under police control, the worse it is. I think that nobody wants that. I think you guys do a great job. I applaud you. I think you're awesome. But I think there are also some police officers who are not so awesome. And I think that their personal, like in every field, my field as well, who get involved and who don't or aren't objective. And I think we really have to look beyond and work together as a community so that we can all join together and find a sense of peace and understanding to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Please.
Hi, my name is Maria Sanders, and Taylor, you said we were failed by our SROs. We were supposed to be safe. I'm really sorry you weren't. It's not okay. And the reason why that struck me is because our school district in Bloomfield approved a budget of $550,000 to have armed officers in our preschool and our elementary schools. So myself and several other families got together to oppose armed guards in our schools because that's not the answer. There's risk. There's risk of accidental shootings, missed targets, the school to prison pipeline, concern for our children of color and our children of disabilities. We had Tom Gambino from the New Jersey Department of Education, from the Office of School Preparedness and Emergency Planning, tell us that there are 13 other ways that we could do things to keep our children safe and our schools safe without bringing a weapon into the daily lives of our children. This has been a lot of work. We've attended Board of Ed meetings, we have protested, we've made a lot of noise on the media, internet, newspapers, news channels. We're tired, but we're working hard to keep our children safe. And my question to all of you is, if you have any support, if you have any ideas how we can keep moving forward, because we're not done. We're tired, but we're not done. Thank you.
Well, again, next Tuesday is a real opportunity to make change. Rather than arming the guards, if you can start to reduce the number of guns that are out on the street and in the homes, that's an improvement. If you can improve the situation for disadvantaged people in crisis in your community, that's an improvement. And these are non-gun oriented. These are more, let's call them progressive ideas about job creation, better education, family unity, things of that nature. But that's where a lot of these problems develop. They kind of, it's like having a petri dish, and these things, these bacteria and these diseases, they grow there. Early warning signs, keeping the community aware that you are your brother's keeper. You have to keep an eye out. What's going on? Who's at risk, who isn't? A lot of states, I don't know if New Jersey has one, but there are these, what they call red flag laws and early warning signs and emergency risk restraining orders and gun violence restraining orders. There's at least half a dozen states that have them.
We just passed one.
There you go. Well, that means there's 45 or so that don't have them. That allows you and you and you and you and you and me and her to say, I know that Joe is having a problem. I know he's going through a tough time. I know he has guns in the house. This might be an opportunity to separate him. And you can petition, and without a whole lot of bureaucracy, you can have those guns removed on a temporary basis until it can be adjudicated. But it protects people from harming themselves and harming others. So these are types of things that, it takes a broad brush to handle this problem. It's a specific problem, but there are so many different facets to where it comes from. So there's another one that I think that Chief, you have a ceasefire program here, a longevity program?
The city of Paterson has a ceasefire program. It's actually very effective.
Yeah, that's another thing. That's where the police, not only local police, but state police, federal agencies, they all get together and they can identify where the violence is. If you see a map of this stuff, it's like a disease map from the old cholera epidemics and how a flu gets transmitted. It's person to person. And they can identify the potential perpetrators and victims pretty accurately. So they bring them in and introduce them to other opportunities to get them away from continuing the cycle. So these steps in and of themselves seem relatively small, but overall they do. Connecticut, thank God, we've been able to bring down gun violence by about 30% since the laws were enacted in 2013. There was a comparison made by the professors up in Harvard a couple of years ago. They compared what was going on in Connecticut, who even earlier, in 2005, decided to take some precautionary steps with regard to guns. They compared it to Missouri, who in 2005 relaxed a lot of the controls they had. What was the result? Gun violence was up 30% in Missouri, it was down 30% in Connecticut. So it's up to us to keep on working. You're doing yeoman work. Everybody has to do yeoman work. This is a difficult problem. We have to address it on a lot of different fronts.
Thank you. We are approaching the time where I just want to say one thing. Have you tried running for the school board? Seriously. It seems to me the school board is where it begins.
Oh, yeah, we've been there a lot, and we're actually hoping to flip the Board of Ed at the November 6th elections. We're doing a really great job.
School board.
I think it's time that you run.
Yeah, thank you.
Run for the school board. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your terrific questions and for all the panelists for being here today. It's common hour, so I know everybody may have classes at 2. In closing, I'd just like to thank Jane Stein. Jane, where are you? Hi, Jane. Executive Director of University Performing Arts, for her support in reaching out to the panelists, the College of Arts and Communication, the Communication Department, Shea Center for Performing Arts, and IRT for all the support that made this possible. Thank you.
Vote.